You've just woken up in 1347. The good news is you're alive. The bad news is you're a knight and your bladder is full. Your armor weighs 60 pounds. It's made of iron plates riveted together with the enthusiasm of a blacksmith who clearly never had to wear the thing. Getting dressed took your squire 40 minutes and the patience of a saint. But nature doesn't negotiate with chainmail. Tonight, we're not charging into glory. We're tiptoeing through turnips, medieval hygiene, and the subtle art of soiling oneself with dignity. This is not a history lesson. This is what it felt like to live, eat, and relieve yourself in a suit of metal. But before we begin, take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe if this kind of soft, strange history helps you unwind. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's so helpful to know there are others out there sharing our experience, liking what we like, going through what we are going through. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, and let's gently drift into another forgotten corner of the past, together, as we find out exactly how medieval warriors managed to take a dump in armor and still call themselves noble. The morning ritual begins with a prayer, not to God, but to your bowels. Please, you think, not today, not during the siege, not while I'm supposed to look dignified on horseback. Rain begins tapping against the canvas walls of your tent. The sound is gentle, almost musical, like fingers drumming on a wooden table. Medieval armor was designed for battle, not biology. The engineers who crafted your steel shell forgot one crucial detail. Human beings need to relieve themselves roughly 8 times a day. Your options are limited. You can soil yourself and marinate in shame until evening. You can attempt the impossible contortion of removing 60 pounds of metal in a muddy field. Or you can perfect the art of strategic positioning. The wind slips under the tent flaps, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant smoke. Most knights chose option 3. At least your bathroom tonight has heated floors and a door that locks. The morning meal arrives on a wooden plate, carried by a servant who looks as enthusiastic as a mourner at his own funeral. It's porridge again, grey, lumpy, and tasting faintly of disappointment mixed with despair. You're a knight, supposedly noble, supposedly elevated above the common rabble. Yet here you sit, spooning gruel that would make modern prison food seem gourmet. The cook calls it oatmeal. You call it edible paste with delusions of grandeur. Medieval warriors ate for fuel, not pleasure. Bread so hard it doubles as a weapon and occasionally serves as one. Ale so weak it barely qualifies as liquid, more like flavoured water with trust issues. Outside, you can hear the camp stirring to life, horses snorting softly, leather creaking, the distant murmur of other knights facing their own breakfast disappointments. Meat appears only when something dies nearby, and it's been salted, smoked and aged until it resembles leather more than food. The preservation process involves enough salt to melt ice, creating something that's technically edible but spiritually questionable. The vegetables, when they make their rare appearance, are turnips. Always turnips. Boiled turnips, mashed turnips, turnips disguised as other turnips with the culinary creativity of someone who's given up on life. Sometimes, if fortune smiles and the stars align, a few onions join the party. The excitement is overwhelming, like discovering a $20 bill in an old coat pocket, except the bill is an onion and the coat is your entire existence. Your stomach growls in protest, but you eat anyway. The alternative is starvation, and armor fits poorly on corpses. At least tonight you can order Thai food at midnight and it will arrive hot. The weight settles on your shoulders like a metal embrace from an overly affectionate anvil with commitment issues. 60 pounds of iron plates, chainmail, and leather strapping transform you from man into walking fortress. Your squire has just finished the morning ritual of buckling, tying, and securing every piece with the dedication of someone assembling a puzzle made of metal and regret. The helmet alone weighs 12 pounds. It sits on your head like a steel bucket designed by someone who'd never heard of peripheral vision. You see forward, and only forward, through a gap barely wider than your thumb. The sound of your own breathing echoes inside the helmet like wind in a cave. Your arms are encased in articulated plates that click and scrape with every movement, creating a personal percussion section that follows you everywhere. The breastplate presses against your ribs like an iron corset designed by someone who considered breathing optional. Each breath becomes a conscious effort, a small victory against metal and physics. Walking becomes a deliberate act requiring the careful coordination of dozens of metal joints. Each step produces a symphony of clanking, creaking, and metallic grinding. You sound like a kitchen falling down stairs while attempting to maintain dignity. Outside the tent, you can hear the morning fog beginning to lift, dew dripping from canvas with tiny, irregular taps. Your mobility is that of an arthritic robot with social anxiety. Mounting a horse requires assistance from 3 people and divine intervention. Dismounting is often accomplished through gravity and poor planning. The irony is thick as morning porridge. You're dressed for war, but you move like furniture with aspirations. At least your clothes tonight bend when you do, and weigh less than a small child. The call to battle echoes across the field, and your digestive system immediately files a formal complaint. Fear, it turns out, has a biological component that medieval poetry conveniently omits. Your stomach churns with the enthusiasm of an angry washing machine filled with rocks and anxiety. Your intestines twist into configurations that would impress a rope artist, and you're sealed inside 60 pounds of metal with no escape route and decreasing options. Medieval warriors didn't discuss this aspect of combat in their memoirs. The songs never mention the urgent biological rebellion that accompanies mortal terror. The poets focused on glory and honor, carefully avoiding the part where brave knights soil themselves while charging toward probable death. You can hear the distant sound of war horns, low and mournful, carried on the morning breeze like the soundtrack to everyone's digestive crisis. Across the field, dozens of armored figures are experiencing identical internal revolts. The enemy knights are probably having the same intestinal emergency meeting. It's a mutual understanding that nobody acknowledges but everyone shares. The battlefield becomes a theater of biological anxiety where warriors pray for victory but also for bowel control. The phrase "scared shitless" takes on literal meaning when you're trapped in metal underwear with no facilities and limited time. Some knights solve this problem proactively by fasting before battle, hoping an empty stomach provides fewer opportunities for embarrassment. Others embrace philosophical acceptance and invest heavily in extra padding. The truly prepared carry small cloths tucked strategically into their armor, just in case nature overwhelms nobility and physics defeats dignity. Even the bravest knight is still, fundamentally, a human being with human plumbing, wrapped in metal and hoping for the best. At least your anxiety tonight doesn't come with 60 pounds of metal restraints and a captive audience. Sleep arrives like an unwelcome guest who's forgotten to bring comfort. Your accommodations consist of a canvas tent pitched on ground that's either mud, rocks, or some unholy combination of both, depending on what the weather gods found amusing that day. The floor is whatever nature provided, enhanced with whatever the previous occupant left behind, creating a surface that's part earth, part mystery, and entirely uncomfortable. Your mattress is a cloth sack filled with straw, hay, and the kind of optimism that believes comfort is possible under these circumstances. It's lumpy, damp, and inhabited by creatures that consider you an all-night buffet. The straw pokes through the fabric like tiny spears, designed by someone who'd never heard of rest. Each shift of position introduces you to new pointy discoveries. Outside, the wind whispers through the camp, carrying the sounds of guards calling softly to each other and horses shifting in their sleep. The blanket is wool, scratchy, unwashed wool that smells like the sheep it came from, combined with every night who's used it before you. It's been washed exactly never, accumulating a patina of grime that gives it the texture of tree bark and the aroma of a barnyard in summer. You sleep in your underclothes because armor removal takes 40 minutes, and dawn arrives with the punctuality of a debt collector. Your gambeson, the padded jacket worn beneath the mail, doubles as medieval pajamas. It's soaked with sweat, stiff with salt, and fragrant with the essence of what happens when hygiene meets impossibility. The tent walls are thin canvas that block neither wind nor sound. You hear everything: horses snorting, guards murmuring, other nights snoring like broken bellows, mice conducting tiny business meetings in the corners. Privacy doesn't exist. Your tent mate sleeps 3 feet away, and you become intimately familiar with each other's nocturnal sound effects. Sleep becomes a negotiation with noise, cold, discomfort, and the growing suspicion that your mattress has developed its own weather system. At least your pillow tonight wasn't stuffed by someone who considered rocks a reasonable filling material. Dawn arrives with all the subtlety of a cathedral bell dropped directly onto your skull by someone with a grudge. The camp horn blows long and mournful, summoning you back to consciousness like a brass alarm clock designed by the spiritually depressed. Your body feels like it's been trampled by horses with anger management issues. Your back aches from ground that was apparently designed by someone who'd never heard of the human spine. Your neck has achieved the flexibility of seasoned oak, and your legs feel like they belong to someone else entirely. The morning air carries the scent of dying fires and dew-soaked canvas, mixed with the general aroma of a military camp that's given up on freshness. You attempt to sit up and immediately remember why medieval warriors had such short careers. Everything hurts with the dedication of pain that's been practicing. Your spine creaks like old floorboards in a haunted house. The tent is cold enough to make you question life choices. The fire died hours ago, leaving behind ash and the bitter smell of wet wood mixed with regret. Your breath forms clouds that would be pretty if they weren't a reminder of how much everything sucks right now. You stretch, producing a symphony of popping joints and relieved sighs that sound like applause from bones that haven't been happy in hours. Your squire, if fortune has smiled upon you, is already awake and preparing your armor with the resignation of someone who knows this is going to take a while. If fortune has abandoned you, you dress yourself piece by piece in pre-dawn darkness. The routine begins again. Strap the gambeson, lift the chainmail, buckle the plates, adjust the straps, check the joints, tie the cords. Each piece adds weight and reduces mobility until you're once again furniture with aspirations of movement. Outside, other knights are experiencing identical mornings, creating a chorus of groaning, stretching, and complaining in the universal language of people who slept on the ground while wearing metal underwear. At least your morning routine tonight doesn't require assembly instructions and mechanical engineering. Personal cleanliness in the medieval sense is more of a distant philosophical concept than a practical reality. You haven't properly bathed in weeks, which sounds worse than it is until you remember that it actually is exactly as bad as it sounds. Water is for drinking and cooking, not for the revolutionary idea of washing away the accumulated evidence of existence. Your last bath was an adventure in a stream, using sand for scrubbing and hope for sanitization. The water was cold enough to make you question your life choices and populated with things that seemed personally offended by your presence. Now, weeks later, you've developed your own portable ecosystem. You're like a walking terrarium, but instead of pretty plants, you're cultivating things that itch. The aroma you've achieved is complex, layered, with notes of sweat, armor rust, horse essence, wood smoke, and things that died nearby. It's the kind of scent that tells a story, unfortunately not a pleasant one. Rain patters gently on the tent roof above, a sound like nature's percussion section tuning up for the day's performance. You've become nose-blind to your own fragrance, which is nature's small mercy. Others notice, but they're either too polite or too aromatic themselves to mention it. It's like a mutual non-aggression pact based on mutual funk. Your fingernails have become museums of accumulated adventures, each one telling its own grimy story. Your teeth get attention when you remember, usually involving a twig or cloth applied with the enthusiasm of someone who's forgotten what clean feels like. The irony sits heavy as morning fog. You're a knight, supposedly noble and refined, yet you smell like a stable that's been closed for winter and forgotten by time. Personal grooming has become less about beauty and more about basic maintenance, like tending to a garden that's given up but hasn't quite died yet. At least your shower tonight comes with hot water, soap that actually works, and the radical concept of privacy. The latrines represent humanity's eternal struggle between dignity and biological necessity, and biological necessity is winning by a significant margin. They're strategically located downwind from camp, which helps with the aromatic situation but creates navigational challenges during storms when finding them becomes an adventure in orienteering and hope. The walk requires negotiating mud that has achieved the consistency of philosophical despair, darkness that seems personally invested in your failure, and the occasional sleeping drunk who's chosen the path as a bedroom. The structure itself is elegantly simple. A wooden bench with holes, positioned over a trench that's deeper than comfortable contemplation allows. It's functional architecture at its most basic, designed by someone who understood necessity but had never heard of luxury. Privacy is provided by canvas walls that flap in the wind like flags of surrender, offering acoustic isolation equivalent to wishing really hard that no one can hear you. You can hear the morning breeze rustling through the camp, carrying with it the sounds of other nights beginning their day and confronting similar challenges. The approach requires mixed feelings. Relief is coming, but so is the complicated choreography of medieval defecation while wearing enough metal to build a small bridge. First comes the positioning challenge, which requires the careful arrangement of metal plates that were clearly designed by someone who'd never needed to sit down. The backplate must be negotiated, the leg armor adjusted with diplomatic precision. The communal aspect means conversation is inevitable and unavoidable. Nights discuss battle plans, weather patterns, and political developments while addressing nature's most democratic demand. It's democracy in action, if democracy involved shared wooden seats and mutual vulnerability. The facilities themselves offer no amenities beyond basic function. No reading material, no soft lighting, no pleasant scents to mask reality. Just you, the bench, and the eternal human experience of hoping this goes quickly and without incident. At least your bathroom tonight offers solitude, climate control, and the revolutionary concept of toilet paper. Your horse regards you with an expression that clearly communicates his professional opinion about carrying a human-shaped metal sculpture that occasionally makes noise. This is your destrier, your war horse, bred for size, temperament, and the specific job of transporting armed furniture across battlefields. He's magnificent, powerful, and developing what appears to be job-related stress. The morning air is crisp, filled with the sounds of leather creaking and metal jingling as other knights prepare for similar negotiations with their equine partners. Mounting requires a production that involves assistance, patience, and occasionally what can only be described as divine intervention mixed with mechanical engineering. Your armor makes you inflexible and top-heavy, like a statue with balance issues. The horse stands still with the resignation of someone who's accepted that this is his career now, but you can sense his professional disappointment in your mobility limitations. Once mounted, you discover that riding in armor is like being a passenger in your own body, except the body is made of metal and has forgotten how to bend in useful directions. The saddle is high-backed and designed with the understanding that falling off in armor often means staying down until help arrives or spring comes, whichever happens first. Your connection to the horse is now filtered through layers of metal and padding, like trying to pet a cat while wearing oven mitts made of steel. Communication becomes a matter of hope and mutual understanding. The horse adjusts his gait to compensate for your metallic bulk, transforming his usual smooth movement into something that sounds like a drum set falling downstairs in rhythm. When you carry a lance, the 12-foot weapon extends in front of you like a metal fishing pole designed by someone who'd never heard of aerodynamics. Controlling this while wearing armor and riding requires coordination that would challenge a circus performer with engineering training. The horse knows something is fundamentally wrong with this arrangement, but continues anyway, displaying the kind of professional dedication that deserves recognition and probably hazard pay. At least your transportation tonight doesn't judge your life choices or require a degree in mechanical engineering to operate. The lice have established a thriving civilization in your hair, and they're not paying rent. These tiny settlers arrived weeks ago and decided your scalp was prime real estate worth defending. They've built communities, started families, and developed what appears to be a complex social structure based entirely on making you miserable. You can feel them conducting their daily business like microscopic accountants with personal vendettas. Each movement is a tiny reminder that you're no longer alone in your own body. You're a walking ecosystem, a mobile habitat for creatures that consider you furniture. The morning sun filters through your tent, casting long shadows that dance with the gentle breeze outside. Scratching provides temporary relief, but mostly just relocates the problem and creates new ones. Your fingernails, already questionable museums of accumulated grime, become archaeological tools for exploration you'd rather not conduct. The helmet makes everything worse. It's like a metal greenhouse for parasites, creating the perfect environment for tiny creatures to throw what can only be described as microscopic block parties on your scalp. Other nights share this burden with the stoic acceptance of people who've surrendered to biology. Nobody discusses it directly, but you recognize the subtle head movements, the casual helmet adjustments, the universal language of people hosting unwilling microscopic tenants. The truly desperate resort to various folk remedies involving herbs that smell worse than the problem they're supposed to solve. The cure becomes another layer of aromatic complexity in your already impressive personal atmosphere. Medieval hygiene offers no solutions, only philosophical acceptance that some battles are fought on scales too small to see, but large enough to feel constantly. At least, tonight, your pillow won't be populated by tiny creatures with property development aspirations. Your teeth feel like they're plotting a coordinated rebellion against your face. Dental care in medieval times follows the basic principle that if something hurts, you ignore it until it either goes away or kills you. This approach has worked exactly never, but tradition demands consistency. Your cleaning routine involves a cloth, when you remember, applied with the enthusiasm of someone who's forgotten what smooth teeth feel like. Sometimes you use salt, which creates the sensation of gargling with crystallized regret. The distant sound of morning birds provides a gentle soundtrack to your oral maintenance crisis. One of your molars has developed what can only be described as a hostile attitude toward chewing. It objects to food, temperature changes, and your general existence with sharp, personal complaints that echo through your skull. The front teeth have achieved a color that would make autumn leaves jealous, if autumn leaves were the shade of old wood mixed with poor decisions. They're loose enough to provide entertainment when you're bored, which is often. Tooth pain becomes a constant companion, like having a small, angry creature living in your jaw who expresses displeasure through targeted suffering. It influences every decision: what to eat, how to sleep, whether existing is worth continuing. The barber surgeon offers solutions involving pliers and optimism, but his success rate suggests he learned dentistry from someone who considered teeth optional accessories rather than essential equipment. Other nights mumble through conversations with the careful articulation of people whose mouths have become hostile territory. Eating becomes strategic planning involving soft foods and prayers to saints who specialize in oral emergencies. Medieval medicine recommends various remedies involving herbs that taste like punishment and produce results that could charitably be described as theoretical. At least tonight your dental care involves tools designed by people who understood that teeth should remain attached to faces. The boredom settles on your shoulders like fog made of wasted time and missed opportunities. Waiting defines the medieval military experience more than combat ever will. You spend months preparing for battles that last hours, sitting in camps that feel like purgatory designed by someone with no imagination and unlimited time. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the canvas walls, creating a rhythm that matches the endless passage of identical minutes. Today involves the same activities as yesterday and tomorrow. Maintenance, waiting, maintaining while waiting, waiting while maintaining. It's like Groundhog Day, but with more metal and worse food. You've counted the rivets in your armor so many times you could probably identify each one individually in a lineup. You know exactly how many steps it takes to walk the perimeter of camp, how many stones are in the fire pit, how many times your tent mate snorts per hour. Entertainment consists of dice games with stakes you can't afford to lose. storytelling by people whose stories stopped being interesting weeks ago and staring at things until they become fascinating through sheer force of desperation. The horses stand in their paddock with the resigned patience of creatures who understand that life is mostly waiting, punctuated by brief moments of terror and confusion. Some knights practice sword forms to maintain skills that rust slower than their blades. Others engage in theological discussions that sound increasingly desperate as the weeks pass. A few have taken up hobbies like carving, creating tiny wooden objects with the dedication of people who've run out of other ways to mark time. Letters from home arrive irregularly, carrying news that's months old by the time it reaches you. The outside world continues without you, making decisions and having experiences while you sit in a muddy field contemplating the philosophical implications of armor maintenance. The truly desperate begin conversations with their horses, who listen with the polite attention of creatures who can't escape but have given up trying. At least tonight your entertainment doesn't depend on finding creative ways to stare at the same rocks for hours. Your sword requires more maintenance than a temperamental lover with trust issues and expensive tastes. The blade shows spots of rust, like freckles made of oxidized disappointment. Each speck represents a moment when you failed in your daily ritual of care and attention that your weapon demands with the neediness of high-maintenance royalty. The morning light reveals new imperfections that weren't there yesterday. Or maybe you just never noticed them until now, when you have nothing better to do than catalogue every flaw in your life-saving equipment. Sharpening becomes meditation through repetition, stone against steel, creating the rhythmic scraping sound that fills hours and provides the illusion of productivity. Each stroke is supposed to restore the edge, but mostly it gives your hands something to do while your mind contemplates existence. The crossguard has developed its own weather system, accumulating moisture that breeds corrosion with the enthusiasm of rust that's found its calling. You clean it daily, and daily it returns with renewed determination to dissolve into reddish powder. Oil is precious, but your sword drinks it like a luxury addict who's developed expensive habits. You apply it carefully, knowing that tomorrow you'll be doing the same thing again, and the day after that, until either you die or the sword does. The leather grip feels like it's plotting its own destruction, developing cracks that split wider each day despite your careful attention. Rewrapping becomes a recurring skill, like surgery performed on the same patient repeatedly. Other knights engage in similar relationships with their weapons, creating a camp full of grown men having intimate conversations with metal objects that respond only with rust and the occasional satisfying gleam when the light hits properly. The scabbard adds its own maintenance requirements, developing problems that require leather care, metal polishing, and what can only be described as relationship counseling between you and your equipment. Your sword is both your lifeline and your burden, requiring constant attention while providing the comforting weight of something that might keep you alive if properly maintained and if luck decides to cooperate. At least tonight, your tools maintain themselves and don't judge you for neglecting them. The saddle saws have achieved the status of geographical features, like tiny, painful mountain ranges mapped across your anatomy. Riding for hours in armor creates pressure points that develop into what can only be described as topographical protests from your body. Each saw tells its own story of friction, poor design, and the fundamental incompatibility between human anatomy and medieval transportation. The leather saddle, once smooth, has developed the texture of tree bark mixed with personal vendetta. It's been shaped by weather, use, and what appears to be a deliberate campaign to maximize discomfort through engineering. You can hear other horses shifting in their paddock nearby, their gear creaking in the morning breeze like a chorus of leather complaints. The stirrups hang at precisely the wrong height for comfortable riding, but adjusting them creates new problems in different locations. It's like playing musical chairs with pain, moving discomfort around rather than eliminating it. Padding helps temporarily, but compresses into useless decoration that provides the illusion of cushioning while delivering none of its promised benefits. The wool becomes matted, the cloth bunches, and the leather underneath remains as unforgiving as medieval justice. Long rides become endurance contests between your determination and your body's increasingly creative protests. Each hour adds new complaints to the growing list of anatomical grievances. Dismounting provides relief that's immediately replaced by the discovery that walking presents its own challenges when various body parts have forgotten their normal functions and decided to file formal complaints about recent treatment. Other nights develop their own relationships with saddle discomfort, creating a brotherhood of people who understand the specific misery of mobile seating designed by someone who'd never sat on anything for more than 5 minutes. The horse seems aware of your discomfort but continues his job with the professional dedication of someone who recognizes that this arrangement benefits nobody, but continues anyway because tradition demands consistency. At least tonight, your seating was designed by people who considered human comfort a reasonable engineering goal. Your chainmail has developed its own ecosystem of trapped moisture and questionable aromas that would make a swamp jealous. The interlocking rings create thousands of tiny pockets where water, sweat, and various organic matter collect like nature's smallest, most persistent storage system. Each link becomes a microscopic reservoir of everything you'd rather not think about. Morning dew settles into the metal mesh and refuses to leave, creating a perpetual dampness that makes you feel like you're wearing a very expensive, very uncomfortable sponge. The metal conducts cold with the efficiency of someone who's made it their personal mission to ensure you never feel warm again. The gentle sound of wind through the camp flags provides a peaceful backdrop to your textile torment. Rust begins its slow conquest of your armor like a very patient army that never sleeps and never retreats. Each orange speck represents metal slowly surrendering to the environment, one molecule at a time. The weight distribution ensures that certain rings bear more stress than others, creating weak points that develop with the inevitability of bad news. You can feel the armor shifting and settling like a house with foundation problems. Cleaning chainmail involves tools that seem designed by someone who'd never actually worn the stuff. Hours of scrubbing produce results that could charitably be described as marginally better than before you started. Other knights engage in similar battles against their own portable metal ecosystems, creating a camp full of people who understand the specific misery of wearing thousands of tiny metal problems linked together in fashionable patterns. The padding underneath provides protection from the armor that's supposed to protect you, creating layers of defense against your own defensive equipment. At least tonight, your clothing was designed by people who understood that fabric should remain dry and odor neutral. The camp latrine has achieved legendary status among biological hazards, like a monument to human digestive creativity gone terribly wrong. Medieval sanitation follows the basic principle that if you dig a hole and point everyone toward it, nature will handle the details. This approach works about as well as you'd expect from a plan that ignores chemistry, wind patterns, and basic human dignity. The structure itself defies architectural logic, built by someone who'd apparently never used such facilities and designed them based on rumors and optimistic thinking. It's less a bathroom than a challenge to human adaptability. You can hear the distant sound of morning prayers drifting across the camp, a peaceful contrast to your current environmental crisis. The smell has developed layers like a malevolent onion, with new aromatic discoveries revealing themselves as weather conditions change. Wind direction becomes crucial intelligence that affects camp-wide morale and meal planning. Privacy consists of walls that provide the illusion of concealment while delivering none of its promised benefits. The gaps ensure excellent ventilation and complete elimination of any hope for personal dignity. Location becomes strategic planning involving wind patterns, foot traffic, and what can only be described as olfactory meteorology. Using the facilities requires timing that would challenge a military strategist. The cleaning supplies consist of materials that create more problems than they solve, applied with tools that seem designed for purposes entirely unrelated to human hygiene. Other knights approach with the grim determination of people who've accepted that some aspects of military life exist purely to test personal character through systematic degradation of comfort. Maintenance falls to unfortunates who drew the shortest straws in history's least popular lottery, creating a rotation system that ensures everyone eventually contributes to the collective misery. At least tonight your bathroom features running water and doors that actually close. The battlefield surgeon approaches wounds with the confident enthusiasm of someone who learned medicine by watching other people guess at anatomy. His tools look like they were designed for carpentry by someone who'd never seen wood, then repurposed for surgery by someone who'd never seen the inside of a human body. The collection includes implements that seem more suitable for horse maintenance or aggressive cooking. Medical knowledge consists of theories based on ancient texts written by people who were wrong about everything but wrote it down with such authority that their mistakes became tradition. The morning sun catches the metal instruments, making them gleam with the deceptive promise of sterility and competence. Bloodletting solves problems by creating different, usually worse problems. The theory suggests that removing the bad blood will improve health, which works exactly as well as removing the bad parts of a house by setting it on fire. Pain management involves herbs that either do nothing visible or produce effects that make you forget why you needed treatment in the first place. The line between medicine and recreational chemistry remains fascinatingly blurry. Wound cleaning uses water of questionable origin applied with cloth of dubious cleanliness, creating what could charitably be described as therapeutic optimism rather than actual medical care. Diagnosis follows a system that attributes most problems to imbalanced humors, evil air, or insufficient prayer. This covers nearly every possible medical condition while providing exactly zero useful treatment options. Other wounded knights receive similar care with results that vary from miraculous recovery to educational examples of what happens when you combine good intentions with terrible information. The surgeon's confidence never wavers, even when his treatments produce outcomes that suggest his training came from sources that were more creative than accurate. At least tonight, your medical care involves people who've actually studied the human body and understand how it's supposed to work. The siege has entered its 4th month, creating a lifestyle that combines the excitement of waiting with the luxury of wondering if you'll starve before the enemy surrenders. Siege warfare follows the military principle that patience wins battles, which sounds profound until you're living on progressively smaller rations while staring at walls that show no signs of caring about your strategic patience. Food supplies dwindle according to mathematical principles that ensure you'll run out of everything important slightly before you run out of time to need it. The quartermaster performs daily calculations that produce results everyone pretends to find reassuring. The afternoon breeze carries the faint scent of cooking from inside the besieged city, where people are probably eating actual meals rather than strategic portions of preserved disappointment. Entertainment involves betting on which part of the siege equipment will break first, how long the current rations will last, and whether the enemy's resolve will crack before your own morale does. The catapults require constant maintenance by people who understand mechanical engineering about as well as you understand quantum physics, leading to siege weapons that work when they feel like it and rest when they don't. Supply lines stretch across hostile territory, carrying messages and materials with the reliability of rumors passed through crowds of people who weren't paying attention in the first place. Other knights develop hobbies that involve staring at enemy fortifications with the intense concentration of people who've run out of other things to look at but refuse to admit defeat. Weather becomes the most important factor in daily life, determining everything from equipment functionality to general survival odds, with the arbitrary power of forces that don't care about human military planning. The enemy occasionally waves from their walls with the polite courtesy of people who recognize that everyone involved is trapped in the same fundamentally ridiculous situation. At least tonight, your food comes from places that deliver reliably and don't require months of military planning to access. The priest delivers morning sermons with the passionate intensity of someone who's convinced that sufficient guilt will improve everyone's combat effectiveness. Medieval spirituality operates on the principle that all suffering results from insufficient devotion, which creates a feedback loop where every hardship proves you need more religion to solve problems that religion apparently created. Your sins require constant inventory and regular confession, like maintaining equipment that accumulates problems faster than you can address them. The list grows daily with infractions you didn't know existed until someone explained why they were damning your soul. The sound of morning bells from distant churches provides a musical reminder that somewhere, People are praying in buildings with actual roofs and comfortable seating. Salvation requires performance metrics that would challenge modern corporate productivity standards. You must pray correctly, fight righteously, suffer appropriately, and maintain faith while experiencing conditions that would challenge anyone's belief in divine benevolence. Religious obligations compete with military duties, creating scheduling conflicts between saving your soul and saving your life. The priorities shift depending on whether you're currently fighting or currently dying. Holy relics circulate through camp with the reliability of chain letters, offering protection that works exactly as well as you'd expect from pieces of wood and cloth that may or may not have been near important people centuries ago. Other knights engage in theological discussions that become increasingly desperate as conditions worsen, debating fine points of doctrine while sitting in mud and eating food that challenges faith more effectively than any philosophical argument. Penance involves activities that add suffering to situations already rich in discomfort, creating the theological equivalent of adding weight to people who are already carrying too much. The chaplain offers guidance with the confident authority of someone who sleeps indoors and eats regular meals, while advising others about accepting hardship as divine will. At least tonight, your spiritual practice doesn't require outdoor kneeling on cold stone while questioning whether your breakfast was sufficient penance for existing. Medieval siege warfare transforms military operations into exercises in patience that make waiting for modern internet to load seem like lightning-fast efficiency, creating conflicts that measure progress in months, rather than meaningful tactical advancement. Your position behind siege walls involves watching enemy forces establish camps that gradually evolve into temporary cities, complete with supply chains, entertainment, and long-term residential planning that suggests they're prepared to wait longer than your food supplies can sustain human life. The siege engines arrive with the mechanical precision of devices designed by people who learned engineering by throwing increasingly larger objects at walls until something worked. Each catapult represents months of carpentry dedicated to the singular goal of making stones fly in approximately the right direction. Distant sounds of construction drift across the battlefield as both armies engage in competitive civil engineering projects, building towers, trenches, and defensive structures with the patient determination of people who understand that medieval warfare operates on geological timescales. Your daily routine involves watching the same enemy soldiers perform the same maintenance tasks on equipment designed to eventually knock down the walls you're standing behind. The repetitive nature creates a strange sense of familiarity with people whose primary goal involves ending your existence. Food rationing begins optimistically with careful portion control, then gradually evolves into creative meal planning that challenges your definition of edible substances. The quartermaster distributes supplies with the mathematical precision of someone calculating exactly how long everyone can survive on increasingly theoretical nutrition. Arrow exchanges occur with the leisurely pace of people conducting long-distance correspondence through projectile weapons, creating daily routines where you dodge incoming mail that happens to be sharp and potentially lethal. Other defenders develop similar relationships with the siege timeline, creating a garrison full of people who've accepted that military urgency doesn't apply to conflicts measured in seasons rather than hours. The enemy commander appears occasionally on distant ramparts, probably experiencing identical frustrations with the fundamental reality that medieval siege warfare rewards patience more than tactical brilliance. At least tonight, your schedule doesn't revolve around waiting for walls to fall down or supplies to run out. Medieval wound treatment operates on medical principles developed by people who learned human anatomy through trial and error, creating healing processes that challenge both your faith in recovery and your understanding of basic biology. Your battle injury receives attention from the camp surgeon, whose qualification involves owning sharp tools and maintaining confidence levels that seem unrelated to actual medical knowledge. The treatment plan combines optimism with techniques that work through luck rather than scientific understanding. Surgical instruments achieve impressive levels of versatility through creative applications that suggest their designers never encountered actual medical procedures. Each tool serves multiple purposes, with the efficient improvisation of people who believe that sharp metal objects can solve most anatomical problems. The gentle morning breeze carries scents from the medical tent that would challenge professional perfumers to identify, creating aromatic evidence that medieval medicine generated its own unique atmospheric contributions. Wound cleaning involves solutions that exist somewhere between soap and industrial solvent, applied with the confident authority of people who believe that if something burns, it must be working. The cleaning process tests your pain tolerance while providing educational opportunities about medieval chemistry. Bandages consist of cloth that has achieved legendary status through previous medical applications, creating a recycling system that maximizes fabric utility while minimizing actual sterility. The wrapping technique combines artistic creativity with structural engineering. Pain management relies on substances that range from mildly helpful to actively hallucinogenic, dispensed by people whose understanding of dosage was gained through observation of previous patients who may or may not have survived similar treatments. Other wounded knights develop relationships with healing processes that involve daily negotiations between their bodies' recovery attempts and treatments that seem designed to test their commitment to staying alive. Medical consultations occur with practitioners whose diagnostic methods involve prodding injuries while asking questions that suggest they're learning about your condition in real time through direct examination. The camp priest offers spiritual healing with the systematic approach of someone who understands that divine intervention provides reliable backup plans for medical techniques that operate through faith rather than effectiveness. At least tonight, your healthcare doesn't depend on people who learned medicine by watching other people guess about what might work. Medieval weather during military campaigns demonstrates nature's commitment to providing atmospheric conditions that seem specifically designed to maximize human misery, creating climate experiences that challenge your understanding of meteorological possibility. Rain arrives with the reliable persistence of forces that have personal vendettas against anyone attempting to stay dry while wearing metal clothing. Each drop finds entry points in your armor with the precision of water that has studied medieval metallurgy specifically to exploit its weaknesses. Your attempts at weather protection involve strategies that work temporarily before failing in creative ways that suggest rain possesses strategic intelligence. The waterproofing materials achieve maximum effectiveness for exactly as long as it takes you to feel confident about staying dry. Storm systems develop with the timing of natural phenomena that monitor military schedules to ensure maximum tactical inconvenience. Lightning provides illumination that reveals the full scope of conditions that make medieval warfare even more challenging than usual. Wind patterns carry moisture, cold, and various airborne particles with the democratic fairness of atmospheric systems that don't distinguish between friend and enemy when distributing meteorological misery. Everyone receives equal treatment from weather that operates as an additional hostile force. Temperature fluctuations create daily experiences that range from hypothermic to overheated, often within the same afternoon, requiring clothing adjustments that your armor makes physically impossible. Your body temperature regulation operates entirely at the mercy of external conditions. Mud accumulates with the patient determination of substances that understand their strategic importance in medieval military logistics. Each step involves negotiations with ground conditions that have achieved the consistency of materials specifically designed to trap feet and wheels. Other knights develop similar relationships with weather systems that seem personally committed to testing human endurance through creative applications of natural forces. Seasonal changes bring new varieties of meteorological challenges that demonstrate nature's impressive creativity in finding innovative ways to make outdoor living uncomfortable for people wearing inappropriate clothing. The distant sound of thunder provides atmospheric music that accompanies the daily struggle between human military ambitions and natural forces that remain unimpressed by human tactical planning. At least tonight, your comfort doesn't depend on convincing weather systems to cooperate with your personal convenience requirements. Medieval military logistics create supply systems that operate on principles of optimistic planning combined with transportation methods that assume materials will somehow reach their destinations, despite obstacles that seem specifically designed to prevent successful delivery. Your equipment needs depend on supply chains that stretch across distances measured in weeks of travel time through territories controlled by people whose cooperation can't be guaranteed. Each delivery involves diplomatic negotiations with geography, politics, and basic physics. Wagon trains achieve legendary status for their ability to break down at strategically inconvenient moments, creating repair schedules that transform military campaigns into extended lessons about medieval mechanical engineering. The maintenance requirements exceed the technical expertise available in most army units. Food preservation involves techniques that work through hope rather than chemistry, creating meal planning that challenges your digestive system while testing your faith in storage methods developed by people who viewed spoilage as a suggestion rather than inevitable reality. Weapons maintenance requires materials that exist in theoretical quantities somewhere behind enemy lines, assuming supply officers remember to include items that armies need to function as military units rather than expensive hiking groups. Pack animals develop personality disorders that seem related to their working conditions, creating transportation systems that depend on the psychological cooperation of creatures who clearly understand they're being exploited for human military ambitions. Communication between supply bases operates through message systems that work when weather, bandits, and basic literacy align in ways that allow information to travel successfully across medieval communication networks. Other units experience similar supply challenges, creating armies that function despite logistics systems that seem designed by people who never attempted to coordinate large-scale operations across pre-industrial distances. Inventory management involves tracking materials through accounting methods that assume supplies will remain where they're supposed to be rather than disappearing through processes that combine theft, spoilage, and basic entropy. The quartermaster maintains records with the patient dedication of someone calculating how long military operations can continue using materials that may or may not actually exist in accessible locations. At least tonight, your dinner doesn't depend on supply chains that involve pack animals, uncertain roads, and people whose primary qualification involves owning wagons. Medieval night watch duties transform sleep schedules into rotational systems, where your unconsciousness gets interrupted by guard responsibilities that require you to remain alert during hours when your body insists that staying awake violates natural law. Your assigned watch begins at moments when exhaustion has achieved legendary status through accumulated sleep deprivation from previous military activities. The timing demonstrates impressive disregard for human circadian rhythms, creating schedules where alertness becomes a theoretical requirement rather than practical possibility. Darkness provides atmospheric conditions that turn routine camp security into psychological endurance tests, where every shadow contains potential threats that may exist primarily in minds stretched beyond reasonable wakefulness limits. Your imagination develops creative interpretations of ordinary sounds. Temperature variations during nocturnal hours create climate challenges that transform standing guard into exercises in thermal regulation, where you simultaneously freeze and sweat through clothing systems designed for daytime activities. The night air penetrates armor with democratic efficiency. Wildlife activity peaks during darkness hours when creatures emerge for hunting, mating, and territorial activities that don't consider human military operations as factors requiring accommodation. The forest develops its own nocturnal soundtrack without consulting your security needs. Fellow guards maintain conversation through whispered exchanges that combine genuine camaraderie with competitive staying-awake strategies, creating social bonds forged through shared experiences of fighting consciousness while holding sharp objects. Hallucination management becomes essential skill development when sleep deprivation reaches levels that suggest your brain has decided to provide entertainment through creative visual interpretations of ordinary objects. Trees begin expressing opinions about military strategy. At least tonight, your sleep doesn't depend on taking turns staying awake to watch for enemies who might attack during hours when your consciousness operates at reduced capacity. Medieval religious relic authentication creates spiritual commerce, where holy object verification involves theological detective work that combines faith with forensic analysis of items whose miraculous properties may not withstand scientific scrutiny. Your camp chaplain maintains collection of blessed artifacts that achieved sacred status through documentation systems that rely more on tradition than actual provenance research. Each piece carries spiritual authority backed by paperwork of questionable historical accuracy. Miracle claims require investigation procedures that balance religious respect with practical skepticism, creating evaluation processes where you examine supernatural evidence using reasoning skills that may not apply to divine interventions. The methodology remains professionally underdeveloped. Bone fragment identification involves anatomical knowledge that transforms saintly remains into puzzle pieces, where you attempt to determine original ownership through visual inspection techniques that predate modern forensic science. The inventory system relies on faith-based cataloging methods. Healing demonstrations occur through public exhibitions where miraculous cures get tested under conditions that don't account for placebo effects, spontaneous recovery, or the psychological impact of group expectations on individual health outcomes. The results vary considerably. Authentication documents exist in formats that suggest official approval while relying on handwriting analysis conducted by people whose expertise involves recognizing pretty lettering rather than actual forgery detection. The paperwork looks impressively legitimate. Trading negotiations for holy objects create marketplace dynamics where spiritual value gets translated into practical currency through bargaining systems that treat divine blessing as commodity pricing. The exchange rates fluctuate based on regional miracle demand. Storage requirements for blessed artifacts involve preservation techniques that protect sacred materials from deterioration while maintaining their supernatural properties, through handling procedures that combine reverence with practical conservation methods. At least tonight, your spiritual needs don't require you to verify the authenticity of holy objects whose miraculous properties depend on documentation systems that predate reliable record-keeping standards. Medieval tournament preparation transforms combat training into entertainment logistics, where military skills get adapted for public spectacle through activities that prioritize audience excitement over practical battlefield applications. Your equipment maintenance expands beyond functional requirements to include decorative elements that serve no tactical purpose, while adding considerable weight and complexity to gear systems designed for actual fighting. Form begins competing with function through aesthetic considerations. Heraldry design creates visual communication systems where personal identity gets expressed through symbolic artwork that requires specialized knowledge to interpret correctly. Your family history gets reduced to geometric patterns that may not accurately represent your actual ancestry. Horse choreography involves training your mount to perform synchronized movements that demonstrate impressive coordination while serving no practical military purpose beyond impressing spectators who attend tournaments for entertainment rather than tactical education. Opponent research requires intelligence gathering about competitors whose tournament performance may not reflect their actual combat effectiveness, creating scouting systems that analyze theatrical fighting rather than genuine warfare capabilities. The information applies to limited contexts. Crowd management becomes essential skill development when public events attract audiences whose enthusiasm levels can influence tournament outcomes through cheering, betting, and general atmospheric contribution to competitive activities. The spectators become part of the performance. Prize allocation systems distribute rewards based on tournament success rather than military merit, creating incentive structures that prioritize entertainment value over practical combat skill development. The recognition may not transfer to battlefield effectiveness. Injury protocols for tournament activities require medical procedures that address wounds sustained during activities designed for public amusement rather than actual warfare, creating healthcare needs that combine sports medicine with combat surgery. At least tonight, your combat training doesn't require you to perform military skills as entertainment for audiences whose approval determines your professional reputation and financial compensation. Medieval boot manufacturing creates footwear through production methods that treat foot comfort as secondary consideration to material durability, resulting in walking experiences that transform every step into negotiations between human anatomy and leather engineering. Your daily footwear begins its life as animal hide that gets transformed into foot coverings through tanning processes that involve chemical treatments designed to prevent decomposition rather than optimize comfort. The preservation methods prioritize longevity over user experience. Sizing systems operate through approximation techniques that suggest feet exist in standardized dimensions rather than individual variations, creating fitting procedures that match available inventory to human anatomy through optimistic guesswork rather than precise measurement. Breaking-in periods require extended adjustment phases where new boots gradually conform to foot shape through wearing processes that involve systematic discomfort until leather and flesh reach accommodation agreements. The negotiation period can last for months. Repair techniques focus on extending boot lifespan through patching methods that add layers of material to damaged areas, creating footwear that accumulates personality through successive maintenance procedures. Each repair adds character and weight to the original design. Waterproofing involves treatment applications that theoretically prevent moisture penetration while practically creating foot coverings that trap internal humidity while blocking external water access. The results create microclimate conditions inside your boots. Sole durability depends on construction methods that balance ground protection with material thickness, resulting in walking surfaces that provide adequate protection while adding considerable weight to every step. The engineering compromises favor durability over agility. Interior padding exists as luxury features that may or may not be included depending on manufacturing priorities and cost considerations, creating comfort levels that range from basic protection to actual foot care through varying attention to user experience. At least tonight, your feet don't depend on footwear that was constructed through medieval manufacturing processes that prioritize material durability over human comfort considerations. Medieval astronomical navigation creates directional guidance systems where you determine location through celestial observation techniques that require clear skies, extensive memorization, and faith in mathematical calculations that may contain accumulated errors from previous navigators. Your compass exists as a magnetic needle that points toward magnetic north rather than true north, creating directional reference systems that require correction calculations for geographic variations that change depending on your current location. The mathematics involve constantly shifting variables. Star chart interpretation involves pattern recognition skills that transform night sky observation into practical navigation through memorization of celestial arrangements that change throughout the year according to Earth's orbital position. The reference points move constantly. Weather dependency creates navigation systems that become completely useless during overcast conditions, when cloud cover eliminates visual access to astronomical reference points, leaving you with directional guidance that operates only during clear atmospheric conditions. Time calculation requires astronomical knowledge that translates celestial positions into temporal information through mathematical procedures that combine observation with calculation methods that may not account for seasonal variations or geographic location differences. Map accuracy depends on surveying techniques that created geographic representations through measurement methods that may contain systematic errors accumulated through successive copying procedures. The information gets less reliable with each reproduction. Distance estimation involves pace counting combined with terrain adjustment calculations that attempt to translate walking time into actual geographic measurements through conversion methods that don't account for individual variation in step length or walking speed. Backup navigation systems require multiple independent confirmation methods, since single-source directional guidance can lead to navigation errors that result in being completely lost in unfamiliar territory without reliable methods for determining correct location. At least tonight, your travel doesn't depend on navigation systems that require clear skies, extensive mathematical calculations, and faith in celestial patterns that change constantly throughout the year. Medieval dental maintenance creates oral hygiene challenges where tooth care involves primitive cleaning methods that treat mouth health as optional consideration rather than daily necessity, resulting in dental experiences that transform eating into exercises in pain management. Your daily teeth cleaning relies on rough cloth rubbing combined with salt or ash applications that remove food particles, while simultaneously abrading tooth enamel, through cleaning procedures that may cause more damage than the problems they attempt to solve. The methodology remains aggressively imprecise. Toothache management involves herbal remedies that combine wishful thinking with plant-based treatments, whose effectiveness depends more on pain tolerance than actual pharmaceutical properties. The cure often involves removing the entire tooth through extraction procedures that make the original problem seem minor by comparison. Breath freshening requires chewing aromatic herbs that mask mouth odors through temporary scent overlay rather than addressing underlying oral health issues, creating fragrance solutions that last approximately as long as the chewing process itself. The results provide brief olfactory improvement. Tooth replacement systems don't exist beyond accepting permanent gaps in your mouth where teeth used to provide chewing functionality, creating eating adaptations that require cutting food into increasingly smaller pieces as dental inventory decreases over time. Jaw pain develops through constant compensation for missing teeth that forces remaining dental equipment to handle chewing loads beyond their original design specifications, creating bite patterns that distribute pressure unevenly across available oral resources. The mechanical efficiency degrades continuously. Gum health deteriorates through neglect and nutritional deficiencies that create mouth conditions where tooth attachment systems become unreliable, resulting in dental loss that occurs through gradual loosening rather than sudden trauma. The timeline extends indefinitely. At least tonight, your mouth doesn't require medieval dental care that treated tooth pain as inevitable life condition rather than preventable health problem. Medieval body pest management creates personal hygiene challenges where lice, fleas, and other parasitic companions become permanent residents whose population control requires constant attention through removal methods that never achieve complete elimination. Your clothing provides ideal habitat conditions for insects that appreciate the warmth, moisture, and fabric texture of medieval garments, creating living arrangements where you share your personal space with creatures whose life cycles don't consider your comfort preferences. The cohabitation remains involuntary. Scratching develops into unconscious behavior patterns that provide temporary relief, while creating skin damage through repetitive clawing motions that may introduce secondary infections into areas already irritated by insect activity. The cure becomes part of the problem. Washing frequency limitations mean that cleaning procedures occur rarely enough that pest populations establish stable colonies between bath opportunities, creating parasite communities that view your body as permanent real estate rather than temporary accommodation. The eviction notices prove ineffective. Sleep disruption occurs through nocturnal insect activity that peaks during hours when you attempt to rest, creating bedroom experiences where falling asleep requires ignoring constant movement and biting sensations across your skin surface. The entertainment value remains questionable. Clothing treatment involves hanging garments near fires or in sunlight through pest control methods that may reduce insect populations, while potentially damaging fabric integrity through heat exposure that creates textile preservation challenges. The trade-offs require careful consideration. Social acceptance means that everyone experiences similar pest problems, creating communal tolerance for scratching behavior and insect-related discomfort that becomes normalized aspects of daily life rather than health problems requiring solutions. At least tonight, your sleep doesn't depend on sharing your bed with uninvited insect guests whose nocturnal activities conflict with your rest requirements. Medieval nighttime bathroom arrangements create sanitation challenges where natural body functions during darkness hours require navigating armor removal procedures, camp layout, and privacy concerns through elimination processes that transform simple biological needs into complex logistical operations. Your bladder doesn't consult military schedules when announcing its requirements, creating urgent situations that demand immediate attention regardless of current tactical circumstances, weather conditions, or state of dress. The timing demonstrates impressive disregard for convenience. Armor removal for bathroom purposes involves lengthy unbuckling procedures that require assistance from companions who may not appreciate being awakened for toilet-related emergencies, creating social dynamics where personal needs become group activities through mechanical necessity. Privacy during elimination becomes theoretical concept when camp conditions require close proximity to fellow soldiers whose sleeping arrangements don't provide sound barriers for bathroom activities, creating acoustic situations where personal functions become inadvertently public performances. Distance calculations to designated bathroom areas require navigating camp layouts in darkness while wearing partial armor and experiencing urgent biological pressure, creating mobility challenges that combine navigation skills with time-sensitive bodily requirements. Cleaning procedures rely on available materials that may not include purpose-designed sanitation supplies, resulting in hygiene solutions that depend on creative use of fabric scraps, leaves, or other improvised cleaning materials whose effectiveness varies considerably. Redressing procedures require reassembling complex armor systems in darkness while experiencing post-bathroom relief that may compromise attention to detail in equipment arrangement, creating security vulnerabilities through improperly secured defensive gear. Weather dependency transforms outdoor bathroom activities into climate endurance tests, where elimination procedures occur during rain, snow, or wind conditions that don't accommodate human comfort preferences or sanitation requirements. At least tonight, your bathroom needs don't require armor removal procedures or outdoor elimination activities in medieval military camp conditions. Medieval boredom management creates entertainment challenges where extended periods between military activities require mental stimulation through limited recreational options that transform idle time into psychological endurance tests of waiting without modern distraction methods. Your daily schedule includes significant portions of unstructured time where nothing happens that requires immediate attention, creating mental space that must be filled through conversation, simple games, or contemplative activities that don't require complex equipment or specialized knowledge. Storytelling becomes primary entertainment source where fellow soldiers share tales whose accuracy matters less than their ability to consume time through narrative experiences that may improve with successive retellings regardless of factual content. The embellishment process adds value. Gambling activities develop around simple games that can be played with basic materials like dice, stones, or sticks, creating competitive entertainment that adds excitement to otherwise monotonous periods while potentially redistributing personal possessions through chance-based wealth transfer. Weapon maintenance provides productive activity that combines necessary equipment care with time consumption, creating useful busy work that serves practical purposes while occupying hands and mind during periods when direct military action remains unnecessary. Music creation relies on simple instruments that individual soldiers can carry and play without extensive training, producing acoustic entertainment that serves group morale while requiring minimal resources beyond human voice and basic rhythm-making equipment. Physical exercise becomes voluntary activity for maintaining combat readiness during inactive periods, creating fitness routines that serve dual purposes of conditioning and boredom relief through structured movement that doesn't require external entertainment sources. Conversation topics exhaust available subjects quickly when the same group of people spend extended time together without new external input, creating social dynamics where discussion quality may decline through repetition and limited life experience diversity. At least tonight, your evening doesn't require you to find entertainment through medieval military camp activities that relied on imagination rather than technological distraction systems. Medieval sensory environment creates atmospheric conditions where your daily experience involves constant exposure to smells, sounds, and textures that combine human activity with medieval sanitation standards through sensory input that modern noses might find overwhelming. Your breathing involves air quality that includes smoke from various fires, unwashed human bodies, animal waste, food preparation, and leather tanning processes that create aromatic combinations whose intensity levels don't accommodate sensitive olfactory preferences. The atmosphere develops character. Sound environment includes constant background noise from livestock, metalworking, conversation, and military activities that create acoustic conditions where silence becomes rare luxury rather than default auditory state. The volume controls remain unavailable. Visual landscape combines muddy pathways, crude architecture, and utilitarian design elements that prioritize function over aesthetic appeal, resulting in scenery that serves practical needs while providing minimal visual pleasure through deliberate beauty considerations. Tactile experiences involve rough textures from unfinished materials, coarse fabrics, and irregular surfaces that create touch sensations where comfort becomes secondary consideration to durability and availability of construction materials. Temperature regulation depends on clothing layers and proximity to heat sources that provide thermal control through methods that may not achieve consistent comfort levels throughout daily activity cycles, creating climate experiences that vary considerably based on external conditions. Food flavors rely on simple seasonings and preservation techniques that create taste experiences where nutritional content takes precedence over culinary pleasure, resulting in meals that serve biological requirements rather than gastronomic entertainment purposes. Sleep surfaces provide basic protection from ground conditions while offering minimal cushioning or comfort features, creating rest experiences where unconsciousness becomes more important than sleep quality through necessity rather than preference. Tonight your senses can rest from the intense medieval world, where every breath, sound and touch carried the weight of a harder time, and your dreams can drift toward gentler places where comfort wasn't such a rare and precious thing.